Hello folks, and welcome back to Symbols, Patterns, and Gnosis. As always, it's Jason. In this presentation, I'm going to take a look at some patterns in the media headlines, and I'm going to show you evidence of what I believe is an intentional psy-op and part of a distraction crisis, keeping you from doing what you're supposed to be doing here. And we're going to call this the Psy-Optimus Prime delivery. So we're going to observe the internet as a bit of a tangled web we are sometimes stuck in, and we'll look at some current events as obstacles in a game. We'll look at the Australian and Canadian truck convoys and the decade-old repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948. We'll look at patterns in the recent headlines, including the Neil Young versus Joe Rogan Spotify controversy, and I will conclude with an overlap of current events and Young's lyrics as a sign of the dreamlike nature of reality, and as embedded advice on how to play the game. The game being the journey of your life. So let's commence with the rabbit hole. So I want to begin by taking us back to February 5th. I noticed something in the headlines that kind of synced up with some popular paradigms. This page here in the Apple News app was telling me I need to watch Transformers: Dark of the Moon on Netflix ASAP. Interesting. This is not smart writing, but it's so hilariously over the top that it works. I kind of think the same thing about psyops in the media, getting everybody to catch some feels. So I was thinking about Joe Rogan and Neil Young. I was listening to some Neil Young lyrics, and he's got the song Transformer Man, and I was thinking about the Decepticonvoy, and we got Psy-Optimus Prime here. And this third Transformers movie, the action begins over in the Ukraine at Chernobyl.
Mr. Scott, where's your protective gear? Where's your protective gear?
It would not matter. For me, it's only a matter of time. Through the school. Yuri will take you below.
And one other thing, Colonel. In private. There was some energy experiment. It can wait.
So we're going to take a look at some coincidences in the headlines. Now, that article about Transformers was February 5th. We're going to go over here 2 days later, February 7th. On the cover page, of course, we got the ubiquitous COVID headline. And the Ottawa Truckers Convoy galvanizes the far right worldwide. Galvanizes, that's interesting language. Trucks and metal and galvanizing. Psy-Optimus Prime is alive. And then we've got here another headline right on the top of the front page. Ukrainians prepare for war at the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster. And then we've got a kung flu fighting figure skater. Everybody was kung flu fighting. Keep in mind the Greek word scandalon means stumbling block, and that is where we get the word scandal. So when I think of scandals in the media, I think of Decepticonvoys and Psy-Optimus Prime deliveries. So the Psy-Optimus Prime delivery system is your mobile device that's hooked up to the internet. That is a bit like a Cold War weapon. So in that Transformers movie, we got Cold War sites, people catching a cold, not wearing their protective gear, AI trucks and robots playing games, war games on planet Earth while everyone else is stuck in the chaos. And they were beta testing this trucker convoy 6 months ago in Australia. I'm curious if people remember that. I went over to Google, the preferred search engine of the normies, to see if I could find that. And I got a lot of the Canadian trucker convoy until I typed in Australian trucker COVID. And that did the trick. And there we see some headlines from major media news outlets talking about farmers and truckers staging a large protest by essentially blocking traffic with these large trucks. And they were protesting mandates and lockdowns from the government regarding COVID policy.
Truck drivers vow to shut down all major highways in massive anti-COVID lockdown protest. A group of truck drivers furious about public health restrictions amid the COVID-19 pandemic has vowed to protest by shutting down all major highways in Australia next week. Plans to protest vaccine mandates and other restrictions by blocking highways in and out of every Australian state on Tuesday, August 31st. Were first detailed in a viral video featuring a man who identified himself as a truck driver on Monday, according to Daily Mail Australia. The man urged Australians to stock up on groceries and other supplies before the protest disrupts the supply chain. Several other truckers have since made their own videos pledging to take part in the effort to shut down the country.
The irony is not lost on me that in protest of government mandates, which were disrupting people's way of life and keeping them from going about their normal business, these truckers vowed to shut down the country, disrupting supply chains, causing panic, frustration, and blocking traffic. So 2 wrongs don't make a right, 2 rights make a 180. So what does this have to do with the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948? Well, let's go back about a decade. Here's a BuzzFeed News article from May 18th, 2012. Congressmen seek to lift propaganda ban. So there wasn't a whole lot of coverage on this. I figured this would have created more of an uproar amongst the citizens, but this one was flying below the radar. This amendment would legalize the use of propaganda on American audiences. And it's being inserted into the last defense authorization bill, BuzzFeed has learned. So this article here was coverage of the bill proposed within the defense authorization bill. The tweak of the bill would essentially neutralize 2 previous acts that had been passed to protect U.S. audiences from our own government's misinformation campaigns. And the Supreme Court did allow for that amendment. So this is a article not too much later from Foreign Policy magazine. U.S. repeals propaganda ban, essentially spreads government-made fake news to the public. This is July 14th, 2013, a little over a year later. And the bill has become a law. And this is some interesting language here. I find it interesting that when I searched for coverage of this, there wasn't much at all. A couple conspiracy theorist type pages, and you got the BuzzFeed warning, and then Foreign Policy reporting on when it was passed. And this was essentially a green light to create Cold War style media and disinfo campaigns and present it to the American public as if it's the nightly news. Such propaganda should be kept out of Americas to distinguish the U.S. from the Soviet Union, where domestic propaganda was the norm. Now, if you want to take a look at that bill, that's easily searchable here. So you can see that the actual language of the amendment is available. And in one of my earlier presentations, about 7.5, almost 8 years ago now, in Baltimore by Design, Foreign Policy Comes Home, I was reporting on ways in which the general public was getting gassed up by essentially what's fake news. The irony being that the ISIS beheading videos that I was debunking in my earlier work 6 months after I was deplatformed, the UK Times admits that the videos were staged. So keeping this in mind, let's go back to media coverage on the new convoy.
What started as a group of truckers protesting COVID-19 vaccine mandates called the Freedom Convoy. That's what they call themselves. It's snowballed now into sort of blockade in Canada for days. We've seen chaos in Ottawa. That's Canada's capital city, of course, as truckers protest the new vaccine order, which requires truckers entering Canada to be fully vaccinated or face testing and quarantine requirements. The protest has disrupted life for many Ottawans who aren't happy about it. Let's hear from some of them in our series, Your Voice. Take a look.
We have customers that need their goods shipped, and they rely on us to do it. And we have customers in Alaska that rely on us to haul stuff back. We have customers in Canada that need us to ship. And I'll tell you that the frequency of requests since this mandate went into place has increased substantially. Can you get me a truck? Can you get me a truck? No, we can't, but we'll try.
That's going on in Canada. I think it's infringing a lot of people's movements, freedoms. People are isolating way too much now, especially in Quebec. The mandates, passport mandates, it's too invasive. It just goes against everything that we have known as a democratic people. We have never known this having passport mandates.
I understand the pandemic it has taken many lives, but you know what? There's no reason to lose my freedom as well.
I think it's pretty silly. I think that definitely it's been pretty disruptive to the community, to kind of everyone nearby, for sure.
I mean, you can't lock up healthy people and expect them to remain healthy, okay? So the children have not been in school. I personally believe that is wrong. We need to drop the masks, drop the mandates, and start living our lives again.
We're fighting for freedom, my man. We're gonna keep fighting, Trudeau. You have nothing on us, Trudeau. We're gonna win. We're gonna win. We're gonna defeat you, Trudeau. Freedom, freedom, freedom!
And these protests, this conversation has gone viral. Let's talk about how long it could last, this blockade at the border, and what will it take to find common ground between Trudeau and the truckers?
So, from what I can tell, the overwhelming majority of people here are right-wingers who showed up for a protest party, and there looked to be like some high-profile organization going on here. In which a few big rigs were parked in the streets. Most of the vehicles are regular citizens and not commercial truck drivers. But we do have a nice traffic jam. Black Lives Matter was doing something similar in the early days, blocking traffic in order to piss people off, create divide. And of course, you've got the diesel huffing party, right? So in the name of freedom, we're going to huff some diesel. Who was really behind this?
Up in Canada, Canadians, it seems, at least polls show, are broadly supportive of vaccine mandates. Over 80% of Canada is vaccinated. And the Canadian Trucking Alliance, I guess, estimates that 85 to 90% of Canadian truckers are vaccinated. So who's out there? Who's as exercised about this? They've taken over downtown Ottawa. Are these, a minority of truckers, or are there other people with other beefs against the way the Trudeau government has handled the pandemic? Are they out there? Have you got a sense of who's out in the streets shutting down Ottawa?
So it looks like we have a large herd of easily propagandized and motivated people. Kind of reminds me of the early Tea Party that was corporate funded and co-opted by the Koch brothers and others and turned into a professional shit show. Now we've got the mainstream media reporting that 5G and QAnon conspiracy theories are behind the Canadian trucker protests, which are also described as anti-vaccine protests, which doesn't sound accurate according to what I've seen. They're anti-mandates, but anyway. We've got quite a bit of money raised here, $10 million on GoFundMe before that was deplatformed, and then they raised another $6 million. Where is all this money coming from? Because it looks like you have working class people out in the street huffing diesel fumes that have been professionally herded, organized, and funded. So very curious where this money's coming from. And also, the media is quick to point out that the QAnon conspiracy theory, which centers on the belief that Donald Trump is fighting a secret cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiliac cannibals, is closely linked to this. So if you're thinking that maybe it's a good idea that citizens are organizing to express their concerns about government overreach, well, have no fear. They're all crazy because they believe QAnon, which was a conspiracy theory that was promoted and made famous by the government and the mainstream media. Now, to be fair, there is a disturbing amount of close connections between convicted pedophiles, human trafficking, and elite US politicians, as well as UK Parliament, Canadian government, and UK royalty. I found it funny that they've got the white bearded guy with a Carhartt jacket. That's kind of a prerequisite for these kinds of protests. You got to have guys that look just like these two here. That's some good front page photo op right there. And photo ops and psy-ops go hand in hand. So again, we have the Psy-Optimus Prime delivery delivered to your mobile device. And it's a Decepticonvoy. So real feels being professionally organized and herded and then made to look crazy. And therefore, well, if you lean liberal or centrist, you're not allowed to partake. Now let's go over to Neil Young's 1983 song, Transformer Man. So I think it's pretty obvious to anybody paying attention who has even an inkling of appreciation for Neil Young's music that the unplugged version of Transformer Man is much better than that original 1983 version from the album Trans. And the lyrics suggest here that the Transformer Man is someone who has power in his hand, a remote control, who can direct the action with the push of a button. This news that delivered in the lyrics sounds better on the 1993 Unplugged album compared to the original. So I think there's a little bit of a interesting pattern there. That reminds me of the recent controversy that people are still talking about now between Joe Rogan and Neil Young and a few other songwriters like Joni Mitchell and some others. So long story short, Neil Young said, take my music off Spotify. Of course, he doesn't own the rights to that music, so he can't really make that claim. It sounds more like these are two wranglers on the farm creating a bit of a shit show for the benefit of the normies. And you can go on YouTube, and I'm scrolling here after searching through Neil Young, Joe Rogan News, and everybody and their mom has got an opinion about this and has produced some media, and the overwhelming majority of stuff that I found is either pro-Joe or pro-Neil Young, and there doesn't really seem to be any middle ground. Now, before I illustrate my concept about the first farm and the second farm and how Joe Rogan is a farm wrangler, I just want to share with you 60 seconds from one of the premier public intellectuals of our era on the Joe Rogan Show.
It didn't happen in the Columbine case.
They knew it was wrong.
No.
What are you saying?
No, they were doing it because it was wrong.
Right.
They didn't just know, but that's different,
wrong
right?
is the wrong word then.
No, it isn't. It's exactly right. They were out to do the maximal amount of harm in the minimal amount of time.
But they felt it was the thing to do, and they didn't think that there was something.
No, they thought
that they shouldn't do.
No. It's like the Joker.
Right, but they did it. They thought it was something they should do.
No,
but they did it.
Yes.
So they thought it was something they should do.
No.
What are you saying?
I'm saying
Listen,
they
if they
decided.
if they wanted to do it,
Yes.
and they did it. So
Yes.
it's something they should do.
No. No, they did it because it was the worst thing they could think of.
Right, which is what they should do, because they
Well-
wanted to do the worst thing they could do.
Yes, they wanted to do.
Yes,
we can agree on
that's
that.
what I'm
It's just they were out to do the maximal amount of harm
I don't mean
in the minimal amount
with-
of time.
Okay, so that's 60 seconds of your life you're never going to get back. I'm sorry about that, but just trying to illustrate a point about how pseudo-intellectuals and what I call the Alterna Bros fall in love with Joe Rogan and see him as some sort of rebel, a voice of skepticism against the mainstream media paradigms. From what I can tell, it's kind of what I would call a bit of controlled opposition. And there's this idea that the censorship is marketing. So Joe Rogan is not a victim of Twitter censorship. The quasi-censorship is a form of marketing. His outlet doesn't fit on Twitter, and it's not a place where you're going to go to get his programming. However, the censorship does create a support out of contrarians. So a perfect example of that would be someone like Dr. Malone, who worked on early AIDS research. He helped develop mRNA gene editing spike protein technologies. But due to the censorship on Twitter, which is actually marketing, he's seen as a voice amongst, let's say, conspiracy theorists and skeptics of the mainstream paradigm. So a lot of people can't tell that he's just another, voice of a particular paradigm. And the quasi-censorship actually brings attention to his work, and then he is basically branded as the official contrarian voice by the mainstream media. And so you've got people that follow the mainstream media, and then they follow the official mainstream media promoted contrarian voice, and that's part of a kind of a multi-tiered farm system. And I can illustrate how that works here. If we take a look at the mainstream media paradigms as a type of farm, we'll call that farm number one, and that's where the overwhelming majority of people find themselves. They're on farm number one, and you might think of George Orwell's Animal Farm. That seems to be applicable here. And then surrounding farm number one, you have what appears to be something like a free-range farm that's surrounding farm number one. So we'll call that farm number two. So on farm number two, you will find people who typically grew up on farm number one, and they hopped the fence cognitively. And so they see themselves as having woke up. And I'll remind you that woke terminology, before it was co-opted by the left, was used by farm number two Alterna Bros. And they'll look at people on farm one, and they'll laugh at the normies on farm one and the NPCs, and they'll congratulate themselves that they've made it to this woke perspective. But in fact, they're on farm number two. This is the free-range farm. Now, existing outside of this multi-tiered farm system is someone like Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan will broadcast media to the free-range farm. And sometimes people on the mainstream farm are made aware of what's going on farm two by the mainstream farm one censorship and media outrage culture. And the idea here is that Joe Rogan's job is to keep people on farm number two from seeing the free-range fence and then further liberating themselves. And now outside of this farm system, we also have artists and entertainers. And they're very often overwhelmingly making, say, music like Neil Young for people on farm one. However, when you wake up to the reality of this farm system, you can find, as Jordan Peterson would call it, mythopoetic patterns of meaning embedded in the poetry and song lyrics of someone like Neil Young, which speak to a higher level of cognition, and they're just hiding in plain sight. So that kind of music is enjoyed by people on Farm 1 and Farm 2, and also people who have left the farm. Now let's talk about some other language here on the farm that seems to map onto the Decepticonvoy. We've got tractors on the farm, and the tractor trailer trucks at the Decepticonvoy, their job is to keep everybody in line. And so you've got citizens that are looking to protest government overreach and mandates they feel are oppressive, and they've got the tractor trailers making a big show, and those are the big rigs. And this is the farm system, and it's big rigged with the tractor trailers keeping people in line on the farm so that they can profit from your fruits of labor as well as your protesting. So we've got Farm 1 telling people that the members on Farm 2 are 5G conspiracy theorists and QAnon conspiracy theorists. And this is the big farm perspective. And we can see how that multi-tiered farm system works, so that people who kind of wake up a little bit to how fake Farm 1 is, they hop the fence and they're like, yeah, I hopped the fence. And then they give up and they just, tune into Joe Rogan and other people. And that's it. They're on the free-range farm, and they don't know that they're still on the farm. And Joe Rogan and Neil Young both profit from doing their song and dance for people on the farm. And I think sometimes people like Neil Young could be a little out of touch, and they just think that they're engaged in some kind of political activism, and that plays right into the hands of the farm system. So they don't necessarily need an explicit script to know that their actions are scripted. But again, like I said, Neil Young doesn't own the rights to the overwhelming majority of his own music. So, and that's the record industry for you. So it's not ultimately his decision. Also, one more fun pattern I found. We've got the Mexican-Canadian at the border. So they need to build a wall of trucks. This guy looks like Joe Rogan, doesn't he? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this guy and Joe Rogan are the same person. They're not. If you take a close look, you can see it's not the same guy. I just thought that was funny. We got the truckers and Neil Young's Transformer Man, the powers in his hand, waving his flag. And he's got like a belly shirt. Is that guy even from Canada? I think you would get a sweatshirt that fits if it's that cold out there. I don't know. It's like they're trucking up Mexicans from the southern U.S. border in order to do the same border crap at the other border up north. So while listening to Neil Young's 1993 Unplugged LP, I realized there's some patterns and advice embedded suggesting Young is very aware of his position as a big pharma aide. So let's take a look at the Needle and the Damage Done and World on a String, and we'll see if we can find a little advice here. We got Needle and the Damage Done, which reminds me of the COVID phenomenon. It's interesting. Neil Young's already gone through these patterns that Joe Rogan is. I caught you knocking at my cellar door. I love you, baby. Can I have some more? Oh, the damage done. I hit the city and I lost my band. I watched the needle take another man. Gone, gone. The damage done. I sing the song because I love the man. I know that some of you don't understand. Milk blood to keep from running out. I've seen the needle and the damage done. A little part of it in everyone. Here's the line that gets me. But every junkie's like a setting sun. Now, some people have taken that line to mean in a kind of poetic way that these junkies are something beautiful, but their time has come and the sun is setting. But I believe what Neil Young's getting at there is that the sun also rises, and every junkie is like a setting sun, and that you'll be back tomorrow to do this shit all over again, because you can't get enough. And so this idea of the repetitive nature of the addiction, and Neil Young's position is kind of aloof or stoic and, disabusing himself of the whole process because he's paid attention, and he also loves humanity, so he's trying to give him a bit of a heads up. Every junkie's like a setting sun. You'll be back tomorrow, and we're going to do this shit all over again. So that's what the junkie is doing. Let's take a look at World on a String. You know I lose, you know I win, you know I call for the shape I'm in. I'm just a game. It's just a game you see me play, only real in the way that I feel from day to day. Although the answer is not unknown, I'm searching, and how I've grown. It's not all right to say goodbye, and the world on a string doesn't mean a thing. No, the world on a string doesn't mean a thing. It's only real in the way I feel from day to day. The world on a string doesn't mean a thing. And when I think of a world on a string, I think of that, you know, the big hand of the puppet master with the master of puppets pulling the strings. And so the world is in and of itself, by its very nature, a bit of a stage in which puppets are being played. So Neil Young again is speaking about it as if he's above it all or disabused himself of it, and he's trying to share this with other people. In Transformer Man, he says, "You run the show, remote control, direct the action with the push of a button. You're a Transformer Man. Power in your hand, Transformer Man." And so the power in your hand is the Psy-Optimus Prime delivery device. It's your mobile device. And what you tune into is what you tune into, and you can get unplugged. And like I said, that song Transformer Man sounds much better on the Unplugged album. In fact, I think it's Neil Young's best album. It's like a greatest hits live record. So we took a look at some current events as obstacles in a game. The Australian truck convoy was a beta test for what's going on at the Canadian border. And I believe that since the Smith-Mundt Act was repealed about a decade ago, we've seen this kind of media go into overdrive, and it's the source of what I have historically called for a good 10, 11 years now, manufactured polarization. And the Neil Young, Joe Rogan, Spotify controversy plays into that manufactured polarization. So you take one of two sides, and ultimately what that means is you're either on farm one or you're on farm two. And your path on this journey in this world, which seems to have a bit of a dreamlike nature to it, is filled with scandalon, stumbling blocks. And these are designed for you to stumble over. And just like the stumbling block blocks a path, the Psy-Optimus Prime delivery Decepticonvoy is blocking paths and keeping people from going about their daily lives. So again, the irony that the government is shutting down people's freedoms. So what are these guys going to do? They're going to do more of it. They're going to make it worse. It doesn't seem like an effective use of time and energy if you want to show opposition to government mandates. I would suggest that you just refuse to get the vaccine, take your mask off, and do you. But I mean, I understand that people want to protest, but they don't see that these protests are professionally organized and then reported on by a media system that seems to work hand in hand with that government disinformation that has for over a decade now been legal, according to the Supreme Court of the United States. Fake news isn't just a slogan made popular by Donald Trump and then reappropriated by the left. So again, people that were waking up to the farm used the word woke and woke language. They were becoming woke, and then that language was co-opted by the left. And now woke is something of a far left, quasi-socialist, Marxist intersectionality slogan. And fake news, which was something that Donald Trump talked about, was co-opted by the left. And essentially anybody who disagrees with their political team is going to call the other media fake news. So the right says the left media is fake, and then the left media says the right media is fake, and there's elements of deception in all of it. And ultimately, I see this world as a bit of something that's not entirely unlike purgatory. I don't want to spend too much time on this in this video. I'm going to go into that in a separate video dedicated just to the subject. But the Jewish idea of Sheol and the Greek mythology land of Hades, and the New Testament's reference to paradise and Tartarus are all overlapping, and they suggest that the world we're in is a bit of a way station. It's kind of like a purgatory, and we would be in paradise, which is not heaven. The language of paradise in the Christian scriptures refers to a place where the dead go before they await their next destination. So you've made a crossing over a border, and now the vehicle for your soul is at a way station, and you're having your heart weighed against the feather, as it is described in the Papyrus of Ani, also known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The Tibetan Book of the Dead has similar patterns in it, and I believe that these mythologies and religious concepts about where the dead go and this kind of rebirth after a second death, I think that maps onto the world we're in, and it's a very Gnostic idea that overlaps with this idea of simulation. And so I believe this is what Philip K. Dick was ultimately getting at with his Christian simulation theory, that this world is not what we're told, and your job here is to lighten your spiritual load and make some progress. And this media in the farm system is designed to keep you in line, carrying baggage. And there we have more trucker iconography and symbolism, right? You're carrying a heavy load, you go into the way station, and the media, the paradigms, and the culture of today are designed to keep you loaded up and gassed up. So you're going to continue on your journey, and you're going to carry other people's baggage, and this is going to prevent you spiritually from evolving to the point where you are ready to go on to the next level of your spiritual existence when your physical body dies. So this physical world is a bit of an illusion. It's built like a bardo or a Sheol, Hades, paradise, purgatory. It's all the same thing. So that's where we'll be going in some future videos, but that's how I see it play out when I'm thinking about the border crossing and the trucks and the farm system. So in order to get off the farm, you got to lighten your load. And in order to successfully make that crossing across the border and make it through the way station, you need to have a light heart. So good luck out there doing that. Thank you for coming out. Good night, and God bless.
Only real in